So this is attempt number 4 at filming this, so let's hope that this one works. I'm here today to talk about what books you should read based on your star sign or your zodiac sign. So this is going to be quite a lengthy video because I've got to discuss all the different star signs. So I'm just going to jump straight into it, and we're going to start with Aries. Aries tend to be quite bold and ambitious, but they can get a little bit frustrated with too many sort of outside details. They like things to be sort of quick, simplified, and they aren't really a fan of various nuances or just sort of extensive information overload. And a lot of Aries are known for having a slightly risque side. They tend to sort of jump straight into things and think after they leap, and tend to learn lessons the hard way that way. And so for that reason, I'm going to recommend the Maestro books. Now, the Maestro books are sort of what I would consider slightly an erotic thriller. The series follows Judith, who is involved in the art underworld, in art forgery, and sort of linking in with the mafia and all sorts of things like that. So you've got like a real element of danger there, which should appeal to the Aries. But also within the story, there is sort of an extreme amount of eroticism, and there are some very risque scenes, shall we say. And I know that sort of was a sort of a turn-off factor for a lot of readers, myself included. I wasn't a fan of that. However, for the Aries with the slightly more risque side, I think that they might actually enjoy the added element of this to the story, and mixed with the danger and sort of the quick, fast-paced sort of storyline, I think it would be a really good series for any Aries out there. Next up, we've got Taurus. Now, Taurus is a completely different kettle of fish. People with the Taurus star sign tend to really like things to be serene and calm, and a serene environment with sort of soft sounds and really nice sort of soothing smells, and they don't like to be stressed out. They're ruled by Venus, which is the planet of sort of love and beauty, and they really enjoy being pampered, but also security is extremely important to them, and they really like to be very secure in a relationship, and they don't like sort of outside stresses coming in and ruining what they've got. So for that reason, I'm going to recommend Island Christmas. Now, I know it's a Christmas book. However, I did not know that this book was not a standalone. I thought it was a standalone, but it's actually part of a series, and the rest of the series isn't involved in Christmas time. So I'm assuming that the rest of the series will be just as good as Island Christmas was. But the reason I'm recommending Island Christmas is because it is set on a remote Scottish island at Christmas time, and you have the sort of the nice gentle build-up of the Christmas season, the cozy feel that comes with that, and you also have the added security of sort of knowing everybody on the island. And even though it was part of a series and not a standalone, I found that I was quickly able to sort of become one with the island and sort of get to know everybody and sort of feel like I belonged, which I think will really, really appeal to anybody who's a Taurus out there. It was just all round a very soothing and relaxing read. Next up, we've got Gemini. Now, Gemini are known as being sort of the social butterflies of the star sign. They're full of energy and can be the life and soul of the party, but they're often juggling just a lot. And their symbol is the twins, and the reason for that is that they take on so much that you would need 2 people to be able to do it. They sort of jump in with full of passion about everything, whether it be their hobbies or their friends or their family or their jobs. They're fearless thinkers, and they're up for trying new things, which is more things to add to their ever-growing list of things that they need to do. However, because they take on so many activities and different things, they tend to have quite a short attention span, and they'll jump from one thing to the next. And so I'm going to recommend a short story collection. I'm going to recommend Sweet Home by Cara Spray. Sweet Home is a collection that plays with the idea of home, because the idea of the home is sort of like a social hubbub where you sort of, with your nearest and your dearest, you can be who you are and talk to everybody and just sort of feel at ease. However, Sweet Home plays with the idea of this a little and sort of manipulates it a bit, and adds a few fantastical elements in. For example, one of the short stories within the collection is about a woman who goes to the supermarket, and as she sort of peruses the aisles and gets the milk and bread and things, she also picks a baby off the shelf, because in this sort of alternate world, we have babies on the shelves in supermarkets. And I think that the sort of the playing around with it will sort of capture the imagination and the sort of the forward-thinking element of Gemini's personality. But also, with it being a short story collection, it means that you can dip in and out without having to get embroiled in one story for sort of 300 and odd pages. It is a jump in, jump out situation, which will be perfect for any Geminis out there. Next up we've got Cancer. Now Cancer signs are known to be very intuitive, and they can actually possess psychic powers. They're known as being quite a sort of a psychic star sign, and they're known for being able to sort of walk into a room and just pick up on all of the energies that are within the room and just figure out what's going on there without even knowing the people in the room. They've generally got quite a tough shell to crack, and a lot of Cancers can be seen as quite cold and distant. However, when you get through that shell and you're one of sort of a Cancer's inner circle, you can see that they're very sort of generous of spirit, and they're very, very caring about the people around them, the people that they live with, and family is very important to them. So I think a perfect book for any Cancers out there would be The Binding. The Binding is such an interesting tale. I don't want to spoil it too much by giving away exactly what it's about, because I went into it blind, and I know a couple of other people that went into it blind and really enjoyed it, all the more because you just didn't see what was coming. It has a very small element of magical realism. I say it as a person who isn't too into magical realism myself. I like things to be very sort of believable, if you will. The way that it is done within The Binding makes it extremely believable, which I think will sort of appeal to the intuitive and slightly psychic side of the Cancer sign. The Binding follows Emmett Farmer, who is a farmer, but he wakes up one day and finds out that his parents are sending him to work in the bindery. Now, the bindery is where they make books. However, in this sort of time frame that we are in this sort of world within the Binding, the binders are looked upon with extreme suspicion, and they're sort of seen as the devil's work, and there's sort of an element of sort of magicalness that goes into it that no one quite understands. And The Binding just opens all that up for us, and it's just such an interesting, really deep-rooted sort of familial tale, but also there's just something extra, and I really can't recommend it enough, so if you read it, let me know. Now next up we've got Leos. Now Leos absolutely love the spotlight. They're natural leaders, they're extremely charismatic, they're great at making friends, relationships, acquaintances, they do well in careers, they can fly high because they're just so good at all that networking and sort of putting themselves out there, and they're not afraid to really stand out from the crowd and force themselves into your face at times. A lot of sort of problematic celebrities who have a lot of their sort of dramas playing out in the tabloids tend to be Leos as well, and they are actually quite drawn to sort of drama-fueled relationships. They just sort of thrive on it. But saying that, they're really supportive of friends and family, and they will back you up and try and push you forward and get you right where you want to be in your career and in your life. Unless, of course, you're sort of taking them down. They don't like anybody else to sort of top trumps them. They like to be at the top of their field, and they'll help everybody else out as long as you're not actually there to try and take from them. So I'm going to recommend Your Guilty Secret to any Leos out there. Your Guilty Secret follows a celebrity who's well known. She's sort of seen over the breakfast tables of many. Everybody knows who she is, and she's sort of the golden girl. She's got a perfect husband, she's got a perfect child, she's got the perfect relationship, marriage, sort of life, but then something happens where there ends up being a secret uncovered, and there's a media frenzy. And she is not prepared to let anybody take away her perfect life and her perfect story, and yeah, I recommend that to any Leos out there. Next up we've got Virgo. Now Virgo is ruled by the goddess of wheat and agriculture, which means that they're sort of quite rooted in the materialistic world. They're logical and practical, and sometimes can come across a bit blunt, and they're perfectionists, and they strive hard to really improve any skills that they've got. They're sticklers for details as well, and they can process a lot of facts to come to a sort of a streamlined conclusion, so they can sort of take a lot of everything and manage to turn it into one sort of idea that fits them. However, they do find it hard to take in other points of view, and they do find it hard to sort of see any beauty in imperfection. They like everything to be just so. And for that reason, I'm going to recommend The Collector. Now, The Collector is a classic, and it is a rather difficult read. The subject is a man who really likes to collect things, and he sort of has things like butterflies that he just has pinned, and he likes the perfect butterflies pinned perfectly in his collection, and he just sort of works towards perfection and his idea of what he thinks is perfection. And he sets his sights on a woman, and he wants her to remain everything he wants her to be. So he sort of puts her on a pedestal and decides that this is the person that she is, and he wants to collect her and make her into his perfect woman. And it's a very disturbing tale. It's not an easy read at all, but I do think it'll be a really good one for all you Virgos out there. Next up we've got Libra. Now Libra is the only star sign that is represented by an inanimate object. It is represented by the scales, and Libras are known for being able to balance up the pros and cons of a lot of situations and take in everybody's opinion. So even if a Libra has an idea that they think is right, they're perfectly open to hearing what you have to say, regardless of whether they change their mind or not, but they are willing to sort of hear both sides of each argument, and for that reason they're perfect mediators. They also strive for harmony and balance, and they shy away from any confrontation. They're just sort of quite floaty and airy. They're also ruled by Venus, who represents love and beauty and money, and Libras tend to really like things such as art and intellectualism, reading, artistic pursuits, creativity. They value high value things. With them being sort of floaty and whimsical, they love the idea of love, and they sometimes go a little bit too far to please those that they do love. They're known for people pleasing, and will say one thing to you for what they think you want to hear and say something totally different to someone else, which isn't meant to be sort of two-faced thing. It's just that they really don't want to say something that's going to offend someone else. Now, a book that I think would work perfectly for any Libras out there is The Girl Before. Now, The Girl Before is a really interesting book. It's sort of a claustrophobic thriller, and it is about not being safe in your own home. Now, for Libras, that will really sort of toy at the emotions because they feel they need to be safe in their own spaces, and having that sort of element of danger within your own home will make it sort of a more thrilling read for any Libras out there. And it is about a state-of-the-art home which is absolutely beautiful, really futuristic, built as a work of art, which will appeal to a Libra's love of all things beautiful and arty, and about being able to rent this house, but it comes with a list of very specific and very detailed rules. And we follow a woman who lives in it, and she starts to wonder about the girl before. And as she starts to unravel what happened to the girl before, that's when we start getting sort of the element of danger within the home. And I think the story would really appeal to Libras, and yeah, just let me know if you read it. Next up we've got Scorpios. Now Scorpios are powerful and passionate. They're also known for being several steps of any unfolding event. So if you're in an argument with a Scorpio, they will be planning what is coming next, and they will work you towards this sort of eventual ending where they can top trumps you and win. Scorpios are very clever at being able to do that. They really know what they want, and they know how to get it. They're also known for being pretty fiery, and they're not the type of person that you really want to upset. So for that reason, I'm going to recommend Sweet Pea. If you haven't read Sweet Pea, you need to. It is about a woman called Rhiannon who, if she is not a Scorpio, I don't know how, she sort of embodies the traits of a Scorpio. And she has a sort of an obsession with writing kill lists. It is very dark humour, I will say, and if you're not into dark humour and you can't sort of laugh at things that people might find a little bit macabre, Sweet Pea might not be for you. But I just think it's a brilliant book, and it is about Rhiannon who, she writes kill lists, as I've said, and you don't have to do too much to end up on a kill list for that day. You could just, for example, squash her bread a bit when you're scanning it at the checkout and you're ending up on a kill list for that day. Or it could be something that you've really offended her and you end up on a kill list for several days. And Rhiannon begins to sort of blur the lines between kill lists and sort of a fantasy sort of outlet for her emotions to sort of real life. And the results are every Scorpio's dream, I would say. So I would really recommend Sweet Pea and also the follow-up In Bloom. Next up we've got Sagittarius. Now people with the Sagittarius star sign are always in pursuit of knowledge. And because of this, they can be prone to wanderlust, and they like to sort of see the world and learn bits about it as they go. And so for that reason, they're quite often jetting off somewhere exotic and new, and coming back with a whole host of tales and interesting souvenirs. They're also known as being no-nonsense straight talkers, and they're just sort of here to learn about everything around them. And for that reason, I'm going to recommend The Women of the Castle. The Women of the Castle is set in wartime Nazi Germany and follows several women of the resistance. And I think the look at wartime Germany from an outside perspective is extremely interesting. It incorporates the travel element because you learn a little bit about German culture as you're going, and about being a German in the time of sort of Nazi Germany. And a lot of the time, if you're from sort of the UK or the American side or the European side, you tend to only hear the bad things. You don't really hear about the people who were living day-to-day lives in Germany. And The Women of the Castle embodies a few of these women who have got very different lives, and they're pushed together in these extreme circumstances, and they all have their own secrets and things that they're hiding. And I just think the whole thing is quite an educational read, but also extremely interesting. And I would say it's an absolute feast for those who like to learn. It's about a group of women who are wives of the resistance, and the resistance are against the Nazi party, and they're against all the sort of the ideals, and these women have been told to come together should disaster strike. And they end up all together living in a castle, sort of rubbing each other up the wrong way, and it's just a really interesting look at history from a different point of view. Next up, we've got Aquarius. Now, Aquarius is represented by the water bearer, which shows sort of a healer bestowing sort of life upon the land. They're revolutionary thinkers, and they strive for positive change, and they're really about empowering people, and they hate injustice and can tend to get sort of involved in being protesters and just getting really involved in issues that represent people today. Along with this, they're rebels at heart, and they really do not like being told what to do. They're not fans of authority figures. Your Aquarius would be the person who was at school, who was bright, very well put together, but also absolutely despised being told what to do by the teachers, and therefore clashed. They can often be identified by their unusual hobbies, their alternative style of dress, and their non-conformist attitude. So the book that I'm going to recommend is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo follows Elizabeth Sandler, who is a complete non-conformist. She dresses in leathers, she has a mohawk, she's a very interesting person, but she's very deeply defensive of those who need defending. And the story is such an interesting one. It is a crime thriller, and it is quite a meaty one to get into. It was originally written in Swedish, and it's been translated to English. And like I say, it is very meaty, but the main reason I'm recommending this story is Elizabeth Sandler. She is a fantastic female character. She's very out there, she's very strong, she's very independent, and she's been through a hell of a lot. But there's one thing that she doesn't do, and that is take any rubbish from anybody. And it's no secret that The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is one of my favourite books of all time. Last up, we've got Pisces. Now, Pisces is symbolised by two fish swimming in two different directions. Sense the pull on the Pisces of sort of fantasy versus reality. They take on everyone else's emotions, and they can become very, very bogged down and sort of feel the pressures of everybody else's life on top of their own, and they just tend to be like sponges and just absorb. And that's why they're so into the fantasy world, because they do need sort of an outlet, and they need somewhere to disappear off to where they're not being constantly bombarded with all of these thoughts and feelings that can be quite difficult for them to deal with. So like I say, they do enjoy illusion and escapism, and so for that reason I'm going to recommend The Bear and the Nightingale. The Bear and the Nightingale is a fantasy story based in Russia, and within the story we follow Vasya, who is a young girl who grows up throughout the course of the book, and she comes from a prominent family, and she is a lover of the old ways of Russia. She sort of sees little demons and house imps and sort of little sort of creatures, and it is all presented to you as perfectly normal. That is what she's supposed to be seeing. However, Christianity is coming into Russia, and Vasya ends up with a very staunchly religious stepmother who does not appreciate Vasya's need to sort of appease the old spirits. And because of this, things gradually start to go wrong. It's a very different read. The language is beautiful, sort of lyrical even, and there's just something about the story that really just takes you off into a different time and place. You really do have to sort of suspend a little bit of belief and sort of open yourself up to the magical world and all the old beliefs and folklores. But once you do, and once you get into that, it is a brilliant read, quite whimsical, and I really think it'll be perfect for any Pisces out there. So there we go, those are my recommendations based on your star sign or zodiac sign. And as usual, let me know if you've read any of them, let me know if you're going to, let me know if I was completely wrong about your star sign and you think I'm talking a load of rubbish. Please let me know down below, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye for now.